All right, well, good morning, everyone. Just to recap where we are, as you all know, over the last couple of weeks, there's been a number of tragic incidences happening across Aurora, and some that happen in close proximity and in the parking lot of one of our high schools. We are very concerned about gun violence, youth violence that's happening in our community. And so we sent out a communication to our families last night, updating them around what are some of the precautionary measures that we're taking. First of all, we have made sure that we are working with our partners at APD and increasing security in and around our schools, particularly our high schools. Secondly, we're increasing our mental health supports. We already had significant mental health supports in place, but for a time period, we're making sure at our high schools we increase that for any students who've been impacted, who are witnesses, who are victims, or in any way are concerned about what they're experiencing during this moment in time. And then yesterday we also made the announcement that for the next couple of weeks, up until Christmas break, we're going to be closing our campuses for the lunch period. We've had open lunch campuses for probably about 12, 15 years in the district. That happens across many schools in the country where kids are allowed to leave during the lunch period to go to local restaurants or whatever else to get lunch. We thought during this time period, as we understand and examine what's happening with APD's investigation, it was a good precautionary measure to close that down for a couple of weeks while we evaluate what's happening in the community. So today's our first day of that. We're in the process of doing that and adjusting to that over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll figure out what our next steps are. With that, I'm open to any questions you might have.
Rico, obviously security and mental health are a prime concern, but what challenges do you have operationally by switching to a closed campus? You have more people that you have to feed. Mm-hmm. How do you keep kids inside from leaving when they're not supposed to? I mean, what are you doing about those types of issues?
Well, there are certainly logistical challenges, and what we asked each of our schools to do over the last week was to work with their teams and come up with an individual plan. We have very different buildings, very different across our 7 comprehensive high schools and our other high schools. And so at each building, there's an individualized plan around how they will address some things around school lunches, around making sure that we've got the right supervision across the building. We're making sure that we work in partnership with our students and with our parents by informing them of what's going on. Our students understand what's happening in the community. They see that, they understand. I think this step is a precautionary measure. We want to make sure we take precautions and not overreact, but I think our students and our families understand that.
To add on to that, how are you enforcing this? Because, for example, today we stopped by Aurora Central just to check it out at noon, and we saw multiple students walking to the field, walking into the cars. I know there are special circumstances where they're allowed to kind of leave campus, but how is the school or the school district enforcing this to make sure that students aren't taking advantage and still getting outside?
Well, we're not trying to run prisons, right? We're not trying to, tackle kids. We're trying to make sure they understand the rules, just like any other rule in school, and making sure that there are a number of kids at our schools who appropriately are leaving campus to take classes at Pickens or to do other things as are appropriate in their schedule. We're going to continue to work with our students, continue to work with our families to make sure they understand this safety measure and make sure that people are doing the things that they need to do to keep our community safe.
But it's not like there's people at the door, hey, don't go out, you're not allowed.
Each school is taking different steps to make sure that, again, kids understand the rules just like they do. And this is similar to the first day of school, right? Whenever you institute a new significant policy, you have a process of kids understanding what that policy is, what the framework of that is, and how it's going to be enforced.
Can you tell us if the school district is doing anything to perhaps have something that would be an intervention measure as opposed to a prevention measure? The reason I asked that question is the city council member has said there just aren't intervention measures. When you think something is kind of rumbling out there, how to intervene and maybe prevent a kid from getting in trouble in the first place?
Yeah, we have significant intervention measures. We were very fortunate in 2018 that this community passed a mill levy to allow us to significantly increase our mental health supports across all of our schools so that we have probably more behavioral mental health supports than many districts in the metro area. What none of us counted on was a pandemic, and the overall increase in dysregulation amongst our students, the increase in behavioral and mental health issues. Our own local children's hospital called this a mental health crisis. So there's no doubt that our system, as well as all the other systems, are somewhat overwhelmed by the need out there. But we're trying to step up in response to the particular issue that's happening with youth violence and respond to those things in our community.
And a follow-up to that, I think I'm hearing you say that there's a correlation between the pandemic and some of the violence we're seeing, at least there are some things that are cause and effect here. Is that what you're saying, Superintendent?
I can't present you with a research study that says here's a direct correlation. What I can tell you is we know that we had a significant window of time where we were not in connection with our kids as we're used to. And kids need connection, they need that strong support. And we think that lack of connection has led to increased issues, social, behavioral, emotional, for all of our kids.
Superintendent, some individuals who work in the community in violence intervention and prevention don't believe that they're able to coordinate with APS in the same ways that they are with other districts. Is there any consideration of letting some of these outside groups who are on the ground come in and work with you guys?
We have a number of outside groups that are very active in our schools and our buildings. We, of course, don't work with everybody in the community, everybody in the world, but we have a number of groups that have very robust relationships with us.
Rico, as you stated, parents at Hinckley and Central might be understanding over the safety precautions, but what do you say to parents at other high schools where there haven't been any incidents? High schools that maybe live on the other edge of the district that are in a closed campus because of what happened at Hinckley and Central?
Well, this isn't about what happened at Hinckley at Central. This is about what's happening in our community, largely writ. Across Aurora, we've seen a significant increase in violence. I believe the police the other day cited the statistic of a 135% increase in people who have been injured by gun violence since January 1st. That's happening across the community, and we're trying to make sure we understand what's happening in the community as we think about how we respond as a district.
So with that being said, is there a consideration that this may continue after winter break is over?
Today's day one. We want to understand, again, what's happening in those investigations, what's happening across the community, and then once we understand that, we'll take our next steps.
I'm sure you heard yesterday that shooting that happened on Dayton and Colfax
Yeah.
and Aurora. 5 people involved between the ages of 16 and 20. Do you know if any of those victims were Aurora Public Schools students?
We're still in connection with APD, trying to understand who was involved and what happened. At this point, I don't have any information that I can share.
I know you mentioned you're not running a prison, but I want to press you a little bit on who has control inside the schools to let these kids out during their half an hour lunch break. Because going back to the Aurora Central situation, I spoke with students there, and they said that anyone can just come and go during their lunch break, and there is no one at the door asking for an ID or verifying that they could leave the campus. Who is in charge of running this, and what could you do to perhaps make changes to make sure that this does not keep happening?
Well, I think you have to be much clearer about what you mean this, right? When we're talking about our school security and what's happening in our schools, we have not seen things happen inside of our schools. Right? And, well, I know, let me finish. We have not seen those things happen. What we've seen are incidences of violence that have happened outside, and what we've had are open campuses where kids are allowed to leave, where they're allowed to go and they're allowed to come back. And during those time periods, there's of course a flow of kids in and out. And there's an expectation that kids aren't letting other people in, and there's also expectation that adults are checking to make sure that the appropriate people are in the buildings. I feel very confident that our school administrators, our campus security, and others are following those protocols and making sure those things are happening. The steps that we're taking are making sure that during the school day that we stay in closer connection with our kids as we understand what's happening in the community around what are increased incidences of violence.
I mean, probably I was not clear enough, but the person who is in charge, is there anyone in charge at the door checking IDs and letting the kids out during their normal lunch break? I spoke with students saying that according to them, right, I'm not inside the school, that there are kids who are not eligible to leave the campus, for example, Aurora Central, and they are doing so. My question is there anything you plan to do to make sure the administrator or the person at the door better makes changes to the system when it comes to checking IDs? I don't know, or my question should be, is there anyone in charge at the door to let them out during their lunch break and then receive them back, welcome them back?
Well, again, right now you're talking about day one of an entirely different process. And each of our schools, as I indicated, have different plans given what their different circumstances are. And so depending on the school, depending on the circumstance, they have different structures in place where they're going to make sure that we monitor what it looks like and what it means to have a closed campus. And again, we don't mean a closed school. We expect that kids can be on the campus, sitting outside on the football field or the appropriate places, having lunch and enjoying an oddly beautiful day in late November. And so different schools, given where there are different locations and different situations, are going to have different processes in place.
Superintendent, is there anything the district is doing right now on a bigger picture scale, identifying some of the root causes of this violence issue and finding ways to address it in the schools?
Well, we're working, in close partnership with our partners in the city and APD to understand what's happening across the community. And again, all these things have been happening very quickly and very recently, in trying to understand: is there issues of gang violence? Are there issues of retribution? Are there issues of just lack of opportunity that kids are seeing? All those things may be in play, and we're still learning that and want to respond to that as appropriate.
What sort of message are you giving to teachers and other staff about what their priorities should be with these 3 weeks that you have between now and winter break, in terms of the academic side of their job, the student support side of their job? I mean, this has to be make it very difficult to just continue with education.
Look, having a safe and healthy learning environments has been and will always be our first priority. Because if you don't have a safe and healthy learning environment, you can't do the things you need to do in order to educate kids to make sure that they have the outcomes that they need for a successful future. How we present that, how we set that up may change. It may change from week to week. It may change from month to month or year to year. And so we are putting in place a different set of procedures given what's happening right now in the community.
Rico, do you have concerns about contributing to mental health issues of students by having a closed campus for the next 3 weeks?
Look, there are no lack of concerns that I have right now. We are navigating a pandemic. We're navigating a school year, which is always a challenge, and we're navigating some very challenging circumstances in the community. We think that this initial step is a relatively small precaution to put in place that we can then evaluate and figure out what next steps are.
Any additional questions?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll conclude the press conference.